Welcome back, nerds! Last time we talked about a severed ear, some mafia emus, and a syrup wave. You thought that was peak human stupidity? Oh, you sweet summer child. Today is so much worse.
Just a little taste. Today is about certified geniuses making decisions so incredibly bad, they actually changed history. They thought they were right. Spoiler, they weren't. Meet our suspects. Highly educated, incredibly qualified, and monumentally dumb. We've got a finance bro losing $1 trillion over a typo, and literal rocket scientists misreading a map. 5 decisions, all 100% real. Let's start with my favorite overachiever, a soldier fighting World War II in the jungle in 1974. Then we have a NASA probe realizing it's space junk, a finance bro hovering over financial Armageddon, and paramedics treating a literal rock in Rome. Peak human performance. Don't forget Zimbabwe, where a loaf of bread costs $150 trillion. The soldier, the spacecraft, the keystroke, the statue, the note. 5 incredible tales of historical brain farts that honestly make me want to scream. History is stupid. Episode 2. I've got the receipts right here in this folder. We're skipping the cute intro today. Let's go make fun of some nerds. Our first story begins in 1945 on Lubang Island. Strategic importance? Absolutely 0. But please, don't tell our main character that, because it will ruin his whole century. Meet Hiroo Onoda, an intelligence officer who was exceptionally good at his job. His boss handed him a scroll saying, "Do not surrender," and Onoda literally made that his entire personality. It's August 1945. Onoda has his polished boots, his daily chores, and a glowing green in-progress status on a mission that is about to age worse than milk. September 1945. The world throws the biggest party in history. Did they drop leaflets to tell him? Yes. Did he instantly tear him up because of his absolute refusal to break the rules? Obviously. Onoda used flawless A+ logic to deduce the truth was fake. So set the timer for 29 years because this guy is about to play the longest game of hide-and-seek ever recorded. By the 1950s, his buddies either gave up or died, leaving him totally alone. So he just kept doing his chores, writing maintain position in his diary for thousands of days straight. He misses the invention of rock and roll and the space race. The 60s happen, the world gets colorful and groovy. Onoda's jungle, however, remains distinctly ungroovy. We literally land on the moon, and he's still hiding behind a tree. The locals know he's there, but honestly, they just can't be bothered to deal with it anymore. Let's review. While he waited, we invented the microwave, video games, and added 1.6 billion humans to the planet. Not a single one of them managed to pass him the memo. He even shot at the people trying to save him. The Japanese government is practically weeping, dropping dudes in business suits into the jungle. Onoda's response to the suits? Nice try, enemy agents. They even played his dad's voice on a loudspeaker, and this absolute brick wall just labeled it psychological warfare. Finally, they track down his old boss, Major Taniguchi, who is literally just trying to run a bookstore in peace. He sighs, puts on his dusty uniform, and trudges into the woods. Onoda steps out looking like he's at a military parade. Taniguchi officially orders him to stand down. And just like that, the mental switch flips, and he sets down his perfectly clean rifle. He walks out into the sunlight for the first time in 3 decades. He surrenders his weapon with absolute dignity. An incredible soldier who was just 29 years, 6 months, and 7 days late to the finish line. Japan treats him like a hero. He writes a book, sees a supermarket for the first time, and apologizes to exactly nobody for doing his job. The guy wasn't stupid, he was just way too good at his job. Unlike our next guests at NASA, who couldn't even read a tape measure. Story number 2. NASA, the smartest organization on the planet. Putting humans on the moon is literally just background wallpaper to these guys. But today, we're looking at a $327 million price tag and how they managed to lose it all. Why? Because of a number 1. Specifically, the wrong kind of number. See, in 1998, they built the Mars Climate Orbiter, an absolute triumph of engineering. The mission plan was perfect, the launch was flawless, and it headed straight into the vacuum of space. What could possibly go wrong? The spacecraft cruised smoothly into the vacuum of space, just a $327 million luggage tag heading to Mars. All systems were completely nominal. It was run by 2 brilliant teams in 2 different states. JPL handled navigation, while Lockheed handled the software, but they had zero conversations about basic math. JPL expected metric, but Lockheed sent imperial. For 9 solid months, they blindly traded mismatched data.
Every single day, the error accumulated. Lockheed sent pounds and JPL assumed newtons. It's literally like asking for apples and getting oranges, so the spacecraft silently drifted further off course.
Day by day, the invisible gap grew wider. Eventually, someone noticed the math looked weird. Naturally, their report got stuck in middle management, while a $327 million typo hurtled through space. Out in space, the fatal error remained completely hidden. Mission Control just sipped coffee and watched green screens. False data fired back and forth on a mechanical loop. The spacecraft flawlessly executed its terrible instructions.
By September, the course error was absolutely massive. But down on Earth, they brought snacks for the big day. Everything was perfectly scheduled for Mars orbit insertion. They were blissfully unaware of the impending doom. The tiny spacecraft finally approached the red planet. It fired its engine exactly as commanded. Then it slid behind Mars for a planned signal blackout. Mission Control settled in for a normal 21-minute wait. But instead of a safe orbit, it took a violent dive. It plummeted straight into the thick Martian atmosphere. The fragile solar panel stressed under the intense heat. Back on Earth, the countdown timer finally ran out.
The flight director watched the expected time pass by. A quick simulation revealed the devastating truth. The steady signal flatlined into absolute nothingness. The room fell into completely crushing silence.
A lonely price tag drifted off into the void. On Earth, optimistic whiteboards were quickly erased because a malfunction is no one's fault. But they were about to find out exactly who messed up.
An engineer sifting through paperwork found the smoking gun. Pound force versus newtons, a massive multiplier of sheer stupidity. That report got rushed straight to the top.
NASA had to admit they forgot to check the units. 10 years and $327 million wasted. They completely changed their protocols worldwide. Now it's mandatory reading for engineering students everywhere. It cost about $655 per student to learn how a ruler works. NASA is brilliant, but they still lost a spaceship over a typo. Both of these things are true. Next up is a stock trader who lost $1 trillion, and I am not joking. Story 3 is about money, specifically $1 trillion of it vanishing into thin air. It takes a lot of chaotic energy to crash the entire New York Stock Exchange. But today, we're looking at a catastrophe caused by 2 centimeters on a keyboard. 20 minutes, $1 trillion, one wrong key. Down on the trading floor, algorithms are making thousands of rapid-fire trades every single second. We've gone from shouting under a tree to absolute computerized chaos. One tick of a clock literally means 10,000 transactions. Humans are officially losing the race against invisible robots. When prices drop, these algorithms panic sell in a loop thousands of times a second. The countdown to disaster starts with a single finger hovering over a desk. Meet our perfectly competent, completely anonymous trader having a completely normal morning. He gets his coffee, checks his screens, and does exactly what he's paid to do. The market is already highly stressed, but it's holding together for now. He writes down a perfectly routine order to sell $16 million of stock. His hands move to the keyboard with exactly 13 minutes left on the clock. The cursor blinks, patiently waiting for a number. He intends to sell $16 million, which is basically pocket change on Wall Street. To a normal person, that's a yacht. But here, it's just a Thursday. The difference between an M and a B is 1,000 times the money. He absolutely intends to press the M key, which is the correct choice. He takes a relaxed breath before doing the most destructive typing of his life. At the very last second, his finger drifts 2 centimeters to the left. He hits B for billion instead of M for million. The system literally warns him and asks if he's sure he wants to sell $16 billion. With the muscle memory of a guy who clicks OK all day, he confirms it. The catastrophic error instantly ripples across the entire trading floor. Procter & Gamble stock absolutely plummets off a cliff in 90 seconds. An absolutely useless warning sticker magically appears after the damage is done. Across the room, a sea of calm green screens turns into a panicked red nightmare. The algorithms detect the massive drop and start aggressively panic selling. Suddenly, totally unrelated blue chip stocks are catching the disease.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average goes into an absolute free fall. Grown adults in expensive suits are throwing their arms up in total confusion. In just 11 minutes, $1 trillion of market value is completely wiped out. It's the largest single-day point drop in the history of the index.
Imagine a 10-story building just violently losing an entire floor in 10 minutes. The algorithms break so badly that major stocks trade for literal pennies. The trading floor hits peak chaos as someone finally puts their head in their hands. Out in the real world, regular people stare at their phones in sheer terror. It took exactly 22 seconds for one typo to destroy the market floor. That's the entire GDP of Mexico evaporating into the digital void. But then, almost miraculously, the market violently snaps back up in a V-shape. The traders slowly lift their heads in relief as the screens return to green.
The market recovered, but the folks who panic sold at the bottom got absolutely wrecked. Our completely oblivious trader is still working, unaware he caused the whole thing. The numbers bounced back, but the absolute trauma of the day lingered. Enter the federal regulators, promising a very serious coffee-fueled investigation.
It takes teams of experts 5 entire months to dig through millions of records. They finally find the smoking gun, a single letter B circled in red ink. The world learns that a 2-centimeter mistake cost $1 trillion. Luckily for the trader, they blame the broken system instead of throwing him in jail.
The government writes a massive report calling the catastrophic typo an extraordinary disruption. They officially install circuit breakers to force the market into a timeout when things get crazy. A forced 5-minute pause is now the only thing preventing robot Armageddon. And that tiny warning sticker gets upgraded to an official laminated policy.
This is definitively the most expensive spelling lesson in human history. 1 keyboard, 1 wrong letter, and 5 months to figure out you shouldn't press B. The pattern is clear. Smart people making tiny mistakes with enormous consequences. Up next is a much smaller story about an ambulance and a very fine statue.
Let's take a breather from trillion-dollar disasters. We are heading to Bergamo, Italy. It is officially classified as an extremely beautiful place. But someone is about to mistake a literal piece of art for a medical emergency. Don't worry, the statue survives this harrowing ordeal.
Piazza Vecchia is basically the perfect medieval square. You've got ancient fountains, lovely architecture, and mild tourists. You also have an unremarkable stone bench with a guy taking a really solid nap. Life goes on around him in completely normal fashion. But if you look closer, you might notice this dude is unnervingly still.
Up close, it's obviously a 19th century marble sculpture of a reclining man. But honestly, this classical pose is exactly how exhausted people sleep in public. If you stand exactly 15 meters away, the illusion is absolutely flawless. Throw in some golden afternoon light, and that weathered marble looks perfectly skin-toned. It sat there peacefully for 100 years without causing a single issue. But unfortunately, our hero today is not looking at it from close range.
Enter our completely normal citizen, briskly walking across the square. They freeze mid-step because something in their peripheral vision looks terribly wrong. They stand in that 15-meter ambiguity zone, trying to figure out what they are seeing. Through their eyes, it genuinely looks like a human who is completely passed out. They watch for 45 seconds without seeing a single breath. So, being a decent human being, they pull out their phone to save a life.
They dial emergency services, and everyone involved is totally professional. The caller accurately reports a guy not moving, and the dispatcher doesn't hesitate. The official log notes an adult male reclining and not moving, which is technically 100% true. Down at the station, 2 paramedics sprint to their vehicle with intense urgency. It's a highly modern emergency response tearing through a 500-year-old street.
The ambulance crashes the peaceful piazza, absolutely traumatizing the local pigeons. The paramedics leap out, unfolding stretchers like the seasoned pros they are. Our Good Samaritan points them toward the tragic victim. Of course, a crowd of tourists instantly forms to film the tragedy for social media. The medics rush the final few meters, hyper-focused on the patient instead of his unusual complexion.
The medic yells out, and the rock gives them the absolute silent treatment. The second medic checks the chest, noting that the patient's skin color is incredibly weird. Getting down to eye level, they start to suspect this guy might be a little stiff. They've laid out an entire modern trauma kit for a piece of antique masonry. Over in the crowd, one local finally realizes what is happening and covers their mouth to hide the giggles. And then, the medic reaches out to physically check the pulse.
The fingers make contact, and they immediately register that this dude is literally ice cold. The medic's brain does a massive, silent reboot to process why the patient feels like a kitchen counter. They look at their partner, give a tiny gesture, and the partner just silently nods back. Because, yep, that is definitively, undeniably a carved piece of limestone. The giggling tourist steps up to politely explain they are trying to resuscitate a local landmark. Throughout all this intense medical drama, the statue remained completely fine. Without skipping a beat, the medics professionally pack up their gear like this happens every Tuesday. The ambulance quietly slinks out the back gate with absolutely zero sirens. In exactly 11 minutes, the grand emergency is over and the piazza goes back to normal. A bunch of tourists are going home with incredibly confusing vacation photos of CPR on a rock, and our boy on the bench just keeps on doing what he does best.
Honestly, nobody did anything wrong here. Humans are consistently trying their best. The real lesson is that if you see someone passed out, you should absolutely still call an ambulance, because the one time it's a marble statue is no reason to ignore the other 99. Oh look, another tourist is already doing a double take at the exact same bench. Next time, we're going to Zimbabwe to look at a $100 trillion bill that was worth about 40 cents.
Welcome to Zimbabwe, a country that quite literally ran out of its own money. It's a gorgeous country with amazing waterfalls, ancient ruins, and a financial crisis so bad we have to start our story with a geography lesson. Their dollar went from being worth over a US buck in 1980 to absolutely zero in less than 30 years. To understand how that happened, you have to mentally prepare yourself for an inflation rate of 89.7 sextillion%. And no, for the love of math, I did not make that number up.
Behold the official government-issued $100 trillion banknote. That is a 1 followed by 14 zeros, officially making it the most mathematically ridiculous piece of paper on Earth. All those zeros and its actual purchasing power was exactly 40 US cents. You can literally buy a pristine copy on eBay today listed as never used for its intended purpose. This piece of paper is going to be our main character today. Let's figure out how things got this delightfully out of hand.
Money is literally just a piece of paper that suffers from severe social anxiety over whether you believe in it. If a government prints more cash than the economy actually produces, that trust completely evaporates. It's like bread. The loaf stays exactly the same, but the cash you need to buy it magically doubles. Multiply that panic by 1,000,000 and you get hyperinflation. The government's brilliant solution was to just keep printing more money to fix the fact that their money was worthless. And that flawlessly stupid logic leads us straight into the 2000s.
In the year 2000, inflation hit 55%, which felt like a massive crisis, but was honestly just a preview. Bread cost 50 local dollars, which was annoying but entirely survivable. The government officials, who were genuinely confused rather than evil, simply fired up the printing press to fix it. So the graph actively started breaking its own axis to fit 599% inflation on the screen. Real people just kept going to work with an underlying sense of doom. The government's genius fix in 2006 was literally crossing 3 zeros off the bills with a Sharpie, while inflation hit 1,200%. The inflation graph had to physically expand its own borders just to keep tracking this absolute nightmare. That exact same loaf of bread now required an $80,000 stack of useless paper. You could sit in a cafe and literally watch the price of your coffee go up before you finish drinking it. So they chopped 10 more zeros off the currency in 2008, while inflation hit 11 million%, which I am once again not making up. Supermarket shoppers had to sprint through the aisles to beat the hourly price hikes. The numbers just got so big they completely stopped meaning anything to the human brain.
Welcome to November 2008, featuring 89.7 sextillion% inflation, which I still absolutely did not make up. That is a number so stupidly large the zeros literally don't fit on my screen anymore. Prices were mathematically doubling every 24 hours, making a $1 loaf of bread cost 64 bucks by Sunday. The government ran the printing presses all night until the actual ink and paper cost more than the money itself. Down at the market, the vendors stopped counting the cash and literally just started weighing it on a scale.
This brings us to the famous image of a guy pushing an overflowing wheelbarrow of cash just to buy a single bag of groceries. Cafe workers were forced to treat updating the menu prices 3 times a day as a full-time job. Employers started paying their staff twice a day because holding cash overnight was basically setting your wages on fire. The entire country unofficially switched to US dollars because a $5 bill bought more than a wheelbarrow of local cash. The official banks imposed a $500 billion daily withdrawal limit, which couldn't even cover a sandwich. But let's be clear, this was a spectacularly failed government policy, not a failure of the incredibly resilient people who figured out how to survive it.
In January 2009, a group of tired officials literally spent 20 minutes deciding to print a $100 trillion bill just to save people from carrying wheelbarrows. The printing presses churned out a beautifully designed, high-quality, perfectly official piece of absolute garbage. It is structurally gorgeous and entirely worthless. This majestic piece of historical currency could boldly purchase exactly 3 eggs and a cup of tea, possibly. You could literally buy an entire house with a single banknote, assuming the house was worth about 12 grand. The saddest part is the elderly folks holding this trillion-dollar joke and remembering when a single dollar used to actually buy something.
The note ultimately became worth way more as a novelty souvenir than it ever was as actual money. Everyone kept them as physical proof that something this profoundly stupid actually happened. The currency completely collapsed, but the eBay market for selling the collapsed currency absolutely boomed. It eventually ended up professionally lit in museum cases as a monument to terrible math. Ironically, as a collectible novelty item, it has actually gained insane value every single year. So just like our statue from the last story, this little piece of paper is actually doing perfectly fine.
In April 2009, the government finally threw in the towel and completely abandoned their broken dollar. The inflation graph experienced a gloriously vertical drop to absolute zero, mostly because the currency itself ceased to exist. The real heroes are the citizens who just kept adapting and surviving while the politicians played with funny money. We finally understand the complete ridiculous journey of the most zeros ever printed on a banknote. And that wraps up our 5 tales of incredibly smart people causing absolute disasters. History is very stupid, but people usually aren't. Mostly. Make sure to subscribe because history is absolutely never going to run out of material.